hope the baby is not distracting, but keep paying attention here. So the pilot asked for flight following. Flight following tries unsuccessfully to try to get in touch with them. And one of the last things you hear on the radio was SoCal, which is flight following, say to the pilot, "Hey, I think you're too low for me to pick you up." Welcome back to MojoGrip. Mike here. Today's video, I want to share my assessment of the helicopter crash that happened on Sunday. Now, I had decided not to post anything on this event, partly because of respect to the victims and their families. But, people have been asking questions and I've gotten emails and comments. So I decided to just make one video on what I think happened, and I encourage everyone to share their own comments out of respect to the situation and the families. So far the last 48 hours or so, there's been several reports that's come out. There have been also audio from the ATC call and some videos and some eyewitnesses that said, okay, this is what I saw happen. And I've tried to go through as many as I possibly can. Now, guys, I am a fixed wing pilot and I don't have any experience with helicopters, but I do understand basic flight rules, and we all are governed by the same basic flight rules. So my standpoint is going to come from being a fixed wing pilot. So from what we understand, the helicopter took off from Santa Ana. Santa Ana is south of Los Angeles, and they flew northbound towards Burbank and Van Nuys Airport. And it was at that time that we heard the very first call to radio or talking to tower, and I believe at that point the pilot was communicating with Burbank Tower.
72 Echo X-ray, Burbank Tower, Burbank altimeter 3019, Burbank class Charlie, surface area is IFR, stay intentions.
If we can maintain special VFR transition on the 101 westbound 2.
November 2 Echo X-ray, hold outside Burbank class Charlie airspace. I have an aircraft going around.
2 Echo X-ray holding.
And there, what you listen to for the most part is just basic procedures. The pilot was asking to be transitioned over because he needed to go through that airspace to get back on his flight plan. Now, for my non-pilot viewers, what that simply means is the pilot was about to cross into a Class Charlie airspace, and it's just a normal procedure to get permission in order for you to go through that airspace.
It's going to be a little bit. I got a citation on a 9-mile final, and then that go around that I just had is going to be turning base to final in about 3 minutes.
Okay, we'll continue holding 2 Echo X-ray.
And so you can hear the tower talking to him, and you hear several things here. So the first thing he says is that he needs to cross over, and he also asked to maintain his special VFR status. Okay, so we are assuming that this was a VFR flight plan. Okay, now to explain what that is, VFR stands for Visual Flight Rules. That simply means that the pilot uses a visual reference outside of the aircraft in order to navigate that aircraft, if that makes sense. Okay, so that's what VFR means. And on this day, the pilot asked for what's called a special VFR. Now, it's still in the same pool, except special VFR, you use those when the weather is marginal, which was the case here. It was, to me, beyond marginal, but the pilot decided to opt in for special VFR. And also, if you listen to the ATC and looked at the METAR for that day in Van Nuys, it was about 2.5 statute miles visibility, which experienced pilots can go through that all day, every day. Someone like myself, I wouldn't even get in the air if it's less than 5 or 6 statute miles. But we know that this pilot was experienced, well-seasoned pilot, and so he wanted to maintain special VFR status. And so you hear the back and forth with the with Tower. Another thing you should listen to was they mentioned 101, 118.
Straight for your transition to Camarillo, did you just want to follow the 118?
118, and then we'll loop around Van Nuys to catch the 101 2 Echo X-ray.
The 2 Echo X-ray, roger.
again confirming that this was indeed a VFR flight plan. 101, 118, these are highways in Los Angeles, and so the pilot was implying that he would use the 101 freeway as a visual reference to keep going on this flight plan. And so that went on, and then the next thing was the tower telling the pilot that, hey, I'm gonna transition you, but I've got some traffic in front of you, both in Burbank and Van Nuys. So they asked the pilot to stick around for a little bit while they get rid of those traffic, and then they can transfer him over.
November 2 Echo X-ray, and for your planning purposes, you can expect to transition to the north side of the airport. I just spoke with Van Nuys on the line, and they've got multiple IFR departures coming off of runway 16, so you can expect to follow the 5 north and cross that way.
2 Echo X-ray, no problem.
317 Papa Burbank Tower. You can expect a few minutes. I got a special VFR helicopter I need to get transitioning. He's been holding for about 15 minutes. South, northwest, follow the 5 freeway, maintain special VFR condition at or below 2,500.
Maintain special VFR at or below 2,500, I-5 northbound 2 Echo X-ray.
Number 2 Echo X-ray, roger, and you're cleared through Burbank Class Charlie surface area from the southeast to the northwest.
Copy that, we'll maintain special VFR, copter 2 Echo X-ray.
Now, back to the communication with Burbank Tower. We know that the pilot asked for a transition, and they successfully transitioned him over through the airspace, and they advised him to fly on the north side of the airport. Now, if you know anything about the airspace there, the times that I've flown through that path, usually at Van Nuys Airport, to be more specific, when flight or traffic is taken off, they're facing south, so they're going that way. And so I imagine that may be one of the reasons why the helicopter was asked to fly on the north side, which is behind the traffic that's taken off. And so we can see on the flight path that the helicopter went behind the airport and then comes back towards the south. And on the radio call to Van Nuys Tower, I believe, they asked him where he was heading to, and we heard Camarillo on that call. And Camarillo is west of LA. So what I imagined was he was going that way, and then he was going to turn right towards Camarillo.
Van Nuys Helicopter 2 Echo X-ray with you for the special VFR transition. We are currently at 1400.
Helicopter 72 Echo X-ray, Van Nuys Tower. Wind calm, visibility 2 1/2, feeling 1,100 overcast, Van Nuys altimeter 3016. Cleared into Van Nuys Class Delta, northeast of Van Nuys along the 118 freeway westbound. Advise when you're in VFR conditions or when you're clear of the Van Nuys Class Delta. Transition at or below 2,500 permitting.
2 Echo X-ray, advise in VFR condition, and then we'll stay on the 118, we're currently at 1400, and we have 0235.
Helicopter 2 Echo X-ray, thank you. And once you clear Van Nuys Delta, did you want to talk to SoCal?
Affirmative, 2 Echo X-ray.
The pilot did stick around, and they successfully transitioned him over. And then when you hear him also talk to a different tower, I believe this is now Van Nuys, and he basically asked for the same thing, maintain my special VFR status, and then at that point he also asked for flight following, or it was suggested to him to use flight following. Now, what flight following is, guys, this is a great tool for all pilots, and I encourage all pilots to use it. It's basically a set of eyes that are watching out for you whenever you're in the skies, and you typically use flight following whenever you're in VFR. If you're flying VFR, you ask for flight following, and basically they help you look out for traffic. And so he asked for flight following, and the next thing you would hear on the radio was SoCal, which is flight following, trying to communicate with the pilot, and that was unsuccessful. And then at some point you heard SoCal go, "Hey, I think you're too low for me to be able to pick you up."
Trey, yeah, you're still on a 1200 code. Are you requesting flight following? Two Echo X-ray, what do you say intentions? 2 Echo X-ray, you're still too low level for flight following at this time.
Now, I've read a few comments about this different speculation out there saying, oh, the pilot was flying too low and that's why it hit terrain, whatever, and that's what caused the crash. But that actually has nothing to do with this call. What SoCal was saying to the pilot was that he was too low for the radar to pick him up, for them to be able to see him and be able to help him out. Generally, when you're looking to have flight following, at least in my experience, you would have to be between 2,000 and 2,500 feet. That's been my experience. Every time I've tried to use SoCal, below 2,000 feet you wouldn't hear anything. They wouldn't be able to hear you. You probably can't hear them either. And I think that's what happened here. So the pilot was lower than 2,000 feet, and SoCal was saying he probably needs to come higher for them to be able to pick him up. And I thought this was a very important moment, okay, during this flight plan. And you can see the opposite side of the spectrum, where the pilot who is in need of help, or I think he's in need of help, and he did try to get that help, but the help was telling him that, hey, I need you to climb up higher for me to be able to pick you up and help you out. But the pilot needed to stay lower to the ground to maintain his special VFR status, or more importantly, to maintain his visual reference, which was the freeway. So I thought there was a tug of war between safety here, and I thought that was interesting just to point that out. But as we know, shortly after that call, we didn't hear anything, and it was shortly after that the unimaginable happened, and the helicopter struck a terrain and the crash happened. Now, there's been several speculations. Some eyewitnesses mentioned hearing sounds or noise of malfunction, and so there's been speculation that something may have gone wrong with the aircraft itself, and that's what caused the crash, and that's possible. Historically, though, we know that when a crash happens, it's usually a chain of events. It's always risk factors. Things add up, okay? And so we know this about the aircraft itself. It's a Sikorsky S-76. This is a helicopter that I covered on this channel once before. And I personally know that this is not your like shabby aircraft. This is a well-built executive. It's a pretty sizable helicopter if you see it in person. We know that this particular one was about 30 years old. And I think if it's well maintained, I don't see anything that could have happened. Now, NTSB report will show if something did go wrong with the aircraft itself. But to add things up, I want us to go through the risk factors, because this is usually, to me, what adds up to something happening, okay? As a pilot, your goal for every flight is to reduce your risks as much as possible.
you